Welcome to PowerUp podcast, the podcast that seeks to empower and dismantle, giving us the power and confidence to question, deconstruct, rebuild, and expand in life. I'm your host, AmaRouge, voiceover and multidisciplinary artist, well-being advocate, food and book geek with over 14 years of movement-centered experience.
I am your host, Mesma, artist, choreographer, yogi and coach with a passion for alchemy, creativity, transformation and workplace wellness.
We recognise that we can't dismantle and empower or be empowered without first learning ourselves, diving deeper to unlearn the harmful, restrictive and unprogressive. It's an ongoing practice and journey for us all, which is why we created this podcast.
Our show features guests doing the work to enlighten, deconstruct and power up in their own magical ways.
We're going to be having conversations around the power of healing, transformation, well-being and creativity, and how they feed our personal and collective evolution, how they help us power up. So when Ella and I were fleshing out the episodes for this series on play, we started to talk about and think about how much being playful and playing is associated with being childish as opposed to being childlike. And that got us thinking about being a parent and playing as an adult and also playing with your children and how you navigate that idea of play and parenting. And, are they mutually exclusive? Can they exist alongside each other? Is play something that is actually just inherently human as opposed to being childish or silly? Because we have this idea, society tells us as we grow up that we need to become more responsible and we need to become adult-like and need to become adults. And often what goes along with that is this idea of leaving play behind because it's something that's seen as being really silly and childish. And so we really got intrigued by this idea of parenting and playing and how do the two coexist and what does it look like, which is how this episode was born, because those two concepts seem to be at odds with each other if society would have us believe that. And so we invited Danny and Ben on the show, which is super exciting. I'm going to let Ella do the intros, but Danny I've known for years, courtesy of Ella, which is so lush to be on something together outside of dance from years ago. And Ben, he's my brother, so this is super cool as well, to be doing something together as adults.
Ben is a 39-year-old husband and father of two, who wasted most of his life paralysed by the weight of false expectations. Ben now hopes to help unburden children of the tyranny of distorted expectations. Danielle is a mum of four. She's a dancer, holistic health advocate, intuitive therapist, and spiritual life coach. She helps women, and more specifically fellow mums, to decrease stress and live more joyfully. She offers support, nurturing, and guidance, and ultimately gives permission to mums to put themselves first without feeling guilty, so that they can show up for themselves and their family from a place of fulfillment and joy. Danielle's modalities include massage therapy, Setchem energy healing, emotional freedom technique, and guided meditation. She utilizes these modalities with her clients to inspire new and deep connections within themselves and to create long-lasting change. Wow, beautiful. Such an honor to have you both.
An honor to be here, guys. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for having me.
Danny, we would love to know, and I'm sure the listeners would love to know, what inspired you to create Lioness Wellness?
Thank you, Amma, for that question. It's been a long journey of creation, and my company, I guess, has journeyed as I have. And in the beginning, this was really about creating a space for mums to be able to relax and be with themselves and other mums, or even with their families, but to be able to really I guess in some ways kind of switch off from what feels very much like your entire reality and existence, which is being in mum mode, often feeling stressed, overwhelmed, having like a million things to do. And I guess the idea started with the end result, which is that I would like to have a venue and ultimately a set of venues where people can really step into a different place and a different space and yeah, I guess I want it to feel like a place that almost creates like this energy of like zen, which might be strived after and never actually reached entirely, but just that they can be somewhere that feels like a really beautiful place to be, where they can nourish themselves, their bodies, their minds, and their spirits. So yeah, there's lots of different aspects to my business, and obviously with everything that's going on and just in terms of my own journey and how things are unfolding, I decided a few months ago that I really wanted to take this into an online space and be able to offer online sessions with mums that still creates all of them things, but it's not a physical space.
Power to you. And thank you for doing that and just going, do you know what, actually, we're just going to jump into it and we're going to put it online and we're going to make it exist already in a space so it's accessible. And so you're living your truth too, right?
Yeah, totally.
Beautiful. And Ben, your bio is so interesting to me. This kind of how you've alchemized really your beliefs about yourself, but also how you're helping other people now to really live fully and to understand that often the expectations that we put on ourselves or that society puts on ourselves can stop us from really living or being our full and true selves. So it'd be lovely to hear a little bit about that in terms of you as a teacher.
Sure.
And kind of whether you notice that in children, that kind of expectation of affecting them or impacting them, and how this influenced if this has influenced how you teach your children or how you play with your children.
Yeah, definitely. I think, gosh, where to start? I mean, let's start with the bio, maybe. I think it's quite a difficult thing to. I think it was difficult for you to speak it out in the beginning because it feels quite negative. And I think it's important in a sense that it has that weight because I think it's a crucial issue. I think to draw attention to this is almost to is to challenge it, and because it's so important. Every day I see children who, in one way or another, are affected by perspectives that have the power to, I guess, to destabilize them. And I think, I guess that answers your question in regards to my teaching. Yes, 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 yes. I think identities can be prisons, and can create fragility in us, or rather can shake fragile egos, and so it could be something as small as calling a child clever, and here I'm kind of drawing on the work of people like Carol Dweck, who people know for growth mindset, and she just talks about how, when you identify a child as clever, in a sense, they have a view of themselves which they're striving to protect, and they think, since I'm clever, things should come easy to me. So there's this false estimation.
Right.
And when something doesn't come easy, they think I'm stupid. And that becomes unacceptable. Failing becomes unacceptable, and failing equates to being a failure. I guess a lot of what I do in my work as a teacher is trying to model the fact that learning is a journey that is not linear. We're all coming from a place of not understanding, a place where we question, a place where we can be wrong, a place where we should be wrong because we're brave enough to venture our thoughts. And play comes into that quite a bit, I guess.
Super interesting. And Carol Dweck, I've actually been studying a bit of the growth mindset and how kind of, this kind of link into imposter syndrome and kind of various ways that we live out our life where we don't really fulfill or we don't believe in ourselves. And I was also reading about, the Matthew effect, which is connected into the Bible actually. So it's based on Matthew in the Bible, because it's this quote in the Bible that basically says, and those who have shall have more. And it's based on the idea that when we believe that we are possible, then we create more because we believe in ourselves.
Exactly.
And those who have not shall have less because, again, we believe that we're not allowed to.
Precisely.
And so we'll live out, our subconscious will help us to live out and make that come true. So yeah, super interesting, Ben.
Precisely.
And in terms of playing with your small people, your amazing small people, does that influence at all, or does that kind of affect how you play with them?
So I think this is probably a good place for me to offer up my definition of play, because I think it does affect how I engage with my boys. And to be fair, I don't know that I have a definition, but I have ideas about play. I think that play is the foundation of everything. I think as schools, there's a reason why children come into reception and they spend, the majority of the time playing. I think play connects to all types of things: socialization, solving puzzles, understanding who we are. I guess evolving as people and maturing, and and in answer to your question earlier, I definitely think it's a human thing, not a child thing, and as much as play is done for fun, I think it kind of encapsulates the idea of, if I'm going to be a bit abstract about it, manipulating and rearranging information in the world in order to, like I was saying, solve puzzles and transform ourselves. So I feel like play is a vital part of life, and in our household, we're playing all the time, whether it's through song, changing the words to songs, whether it's chasing each other, whether it's changing the context of things like having a water fight indoors, or being dinosaurs, roaring and shouting, and being as loud as we can, discovering those new areas of ourselves.
I love a dinosaur as well, just saying.
I love that you play with them like that and you allow them to play like that as well.
Let us know when we can come over for a play date, Ben. We'll be there.
That would be cool.
And what about you, Danny, with your little ones? How does play kind of feature in your lives, and what meaning does it have?
Yeah, it features greatly. My kids are really enjoying playing a lot together lately, and it's a bit weird because sometimes I feel a bit like redundant almost. and not exactly in a bad way, but it's just interesting to see that dynamic shift, that it's not constantly like we need mummy to play, we need mummy to play. So I enjoy kind of like dipping in and out of the play, and also noticing when there's times when if they're happy playing, then I can go and play. It's me still thinking about myself and what I want to get out of it, really. And you know, I know you ladies have spoken a lot about this idea of being selfish and how that is completely necessary, that we think about ourselves and put ourselves first. So this is coming up for me a lot in my world, you know, from having gone from constantly giving to my kids and never to myself, hence me birthing my company, having gone through all of this stuff myself. But you know that now, whether it's first thing on a morning and I'm like, how do I want to give to myself, and to come from a place of playfulness with that, like what is going to make me smile today, what is going to feel fun, what is going to be enjoyable for me, and then what am I going to give to the kids? I've got so many reflections on this, but I guess the biggest one for me is, as parents, how much time we spend in our heads thinking of all the things that we need to do in order to be functioning, you know, and feeling like we're a good parent, because regardless of all of these nuances that Ben's been talking about, you know, the kind of language that we use when we're speaking to children, there's a need to look after basic care, which takes a lot of time. And then there's just all these different levels of things that we need to be thinking about. And I say need loosely there, or with inverted commas, because, you know, what we need to do is up for debate. And I would say that probably what we need to be doing is playing with our kids, you know, or playing as adults. So yeah, I was talking about barriers being in our heads. So I guess kind of what I'm interested in, and the kind of work that I do with my clients, is how do we drop down from the head, from the thinking, from the being in thought and worry and overwhelm and stress and anxiety, because this is what these things lead to, you know. But drop down into our hearts and into our bodies and offer our energy and our time from that place. And it's vast, thinking about kind of what are the solutions and how we do that. But there are many ways to kind of access, you know, and there's so much more to it as well. You know, you think about as a woman, as a parent, just so many things can come into play when we're talking about play. Body image, for example, is one thing that I think about. You know, this is part of my journey. It's part of my medicine. I've changed a lot since I became a mum.
Thank you for sharing.
And it just kind of led me to think about how much of our time as women is concerned with how we look and feel in our own bodies, that literally limits us from being in play. Like, well, what will my body look like if I'm, you know, because when you play with kids, you're literally like contorted in like all these different, I mean, some people don't even like making funny faces, let alone like doing funny stuff with their bodies. And, you know, and this relates to that initial idea of that you were talking about at the beginning, Amma, about being adult-like and responsible and when you're an adult, this is how you behave, this is how you move your body. There isn't any room for being kind of outside of that. And without naming any names, I've kind of been with people who will make reference like, doesn't she look like an idiot? Like, oh my gosh, what is she playing at? When people are playing as an adult. So yeah, there's just so many layers to this, and I think it's such a beautiful conversation to be having.
Fear, and fear of failure in a broad sense, is a barrier to us cultivating an independence through play. So many aspects of what Danny was saying, was hearing this. The main, I guess, barrier is fear that we can't do things, fear that we won't be able to do those things, and I see it come into learning. And I guess I think that's something that I want to eradicate for myself, and for my children and children everywhere. Going back to the labels thing, you see how in psychological experiments, and when I was studying my education degree, how if you label someone something, if you give them the identity of like the low group, even if you change it to like, red tape, like children know, and it affects their experience of themselves, and what they're willing to do. But you can
and their expectations of
precisely
themselves.
But you can see once all that stress is gone, once you're playing around with ideas and messing around, and it's not, and the stakes are gone. And I think often in, maybe the reason why people think there's a crucial difference between play and being a child and adulthood is this idea of stakes. Stakes are so high, and so on and so forth. But once the stakes are gone, you really see people flourish.
Listening to you really made me think of what Adele mentioned about play workers and how important it is for a play worker to just be there to hold the space, but not to interfere and to allow them, because we learn so much from experience, right? That is how we grow as human beings, is having those experiences and making those discoveries. And I think it's fascinating this how when children perhaps aren't told what a thing is and how you're supposed to use it, how they can create. And listening to you, Ben, I also found myself thinking about my mentor, one of my mentors, William Whitecloud, who speaks about how when the baby is born, they kind of need to be held close to the mother so that they can feel and sense into themselves as an individual, but also themselves connected to their mother. And that then around the ages of 2 to 3, that it's the father who shows them the world. And it also always makes me think of that image in The Lion King where Simba is held up to look at the world and told that the world will be his one day. And I just started thinking about gender in terms of these roles, and even this role of, like, both of you have referenced mothers sometimes feeling like they have to be the kind of the stricter one, or the one that's doing a particular type of parenting, and how much that feels relevant to play, and how much our own internal ideas of gender might actually affect how we play and how able we are to evolve and to play out these different roles. Even this thing of, being beautiful as a woman, or our body image and so on. I do this exercise with my clients where we play, that Danielle knows well, where we play like what's the masculine movement. It's a Buto exercise, actually. What's a masculine movement? What's a feminine movement? And how things can be gendered. And then what is a movement in innocence? And so it just feels really lovely of, can we let go of gender when we are in a state of play? Maybe that's my question, Danielle. Can we let go of gender when we're in a state of play?
I love that question. I'm thinking of play in my family and with my partner, who is typically very masculine and has this physique of a very, I don't know what words to use to describe it, but it's interesting to see how Ivan is able to use his body in play in terms of strength and brute force in different ways to how I might play with the kids, and often there's then these requests of like, oh, can you do it like how Daddy does it? And I'm like, well, I can try, but it's probably not going to feel the same. And similarly, how they might request something that I do with them that Ivan is then not able to kind of interpret. But I guess in short, the answer would either be really, really long or super simple, which is that I think that yes, we can, because when we're connecting to that sweet spot in our heart, that place of innocence, then, you know, none of it really matters. And I guess what's interesting in terms of that state of being in innocence is present moment awareness, which is just, I feel like, what everything boils down to always, isn't it?
I just wanted to say I really enjoyed myself. I really enjoyed our play.
Yeah, thank you so much for this beautiful experience. It's just been amazing to hear all of you speak, and Ben, for your very, very wise words. And yeah, thank you for inviting me to come and play.
Thank you for listening. You can connect to us and our guests via the links in each episode's show notes. Before you go, we invite you to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of the goodness to come. And if you enjoyed today, perhaps tell a friend to tell a friend. We are always grateful for you, our listeners, for our fabulous guests, and to everyone who has contributed to and been a part of our journey here.
Our music is by Tomo Carter. Everything else is brought to you by us, the PowerUp Power Team.
I'm Mesma.
I am AmaRouge, and we are PowerUp Podcast.